Drex. I just got finished teaching exotic plane bending, and what we basically covered in class was different ways that you can create cool flower shapes with plane bending. We started off with a basic exercise wherein we have a poi rotating in front of you, and you gradually shift the plane diagonal, then you shift it horizontal, and you switch it to diagonal the other way. Back vertical, so it's going reverse. Diagonal, reverse. Once again horizontal. Forwards, diagonal, and back to your original position. We then did this with both hands to kind of warm our hands up to the idea of playing around with plane bending in this kind of manner. And after we did that, we started playing around with how we can create flowers like this. The first example we did was to create a forwards rotation with the poi at 4 different compass points. And we noticed that in doing so, it kind of turns the plane a little bit diagonal. But if somebody's looking down on it from above, what they're going to see is the plane of the poi constantly reorienting in relation to the center of a person. So if, say, this pen is the plane of the poi, we see it do this in a circle if we look down on it from above. And then we played around with the idea of doing this actually vertically, so you can see this phenomenon work a little bit more clearly. And we compared this behavior to when you have a club or a double staff going around in either an extension or an isolation. So then we started playing around with the idea of doing this in an anti-spin fashion, that is, switching the orientation of the plane each time. What that winds up looking like is you have a rotation where you're going forwards, and then you switch to reverse, and then you switch to forwards, and you switch to reverse, and you switch to forwards again. And once again, this is also the kind of thing that you can do when you're working in a vertical kind of situation too. Once we got there, we went back to our little buzzsaw right here, and we started toying with the idea of using those poi planes and the cross points between them to create shapes. This, for instance, is a pentagram. If I were lit up, what you would see is 5 points that I go between, and each of the lines that I go through is a plane orientation of the poi, and each of the corners then winds up being the cross point between a bit of a 2-beat weave. So when I do this with a pentagram, one of the cool things that comes as a result of that is each time you perform it, the direction that the poi is turning in relation to you reverses. So it starts off going forwards, then it goes reverse, right? We then took that same idea and applied it to creating a hexagram. So 6 points instead of 5 points. And we connect them by creating kind of a zigzag and create what's called a unicursal hexagram, which that then looks like this. And it's really just alternating between vertical and diagonal. Cool. So then we toyed with the idea of doing this with both poi at the same time and creating this pattern, which looks cool. Then we took the same idea and played around with doing it in a triangle, like so, which we found we could then turn into an anti-grid. And also we could take the same idea and use it to create a type of weave that works in all 3 dimensions by putting the cross points for the weave rather than at 2 sides of the body, 3 corners of the body. So cross point here, cross point here, cross point here. In which case you wind up with a wall plane weave on the back, a wheel plane weave in the front. And of course the direction of the weave changes every time you cycle through the the different points. This technique also works, of course, if you're going to do it vertically. So you wind up with this shape. And finally, we talked about some of the weirder stuff that you can do with these ideas, like, for instance, using cat eyes to draw out these shapes so you can make them a little bit bigger. If you look at it from the side, I'm performing the side bits as cat eyes, and that just ensures that the poi is never closer than a poi is like